why do we have to sit with hard feelings? Like, why do it? It's really, 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 really hard work. All these behaviors that we use to distract, avoid, and numb our feelings are not behaviors that bring us into our present moment.
If you're anything like me, parenting in this modern landscape of what seems like impossible parenting standards, and the pressure to always be regulated, or the pressure to teach emotional resilience and emotional regulation and emotional intelligence, this question is key. Why is it so important that we take the time to sit and be with our feelings? And that's exactly what Jenn and I are going to talk about today. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Chill Like a Mother podcast. I'm Kayla Huzar, the host, and we are here with Jenn, who has an incredibly powerful story that she would like to share with us, where writing her book on how to sit with difficult feelings actually coincided at the same intersection of her son experiencing OCD. And so, Jenn, how about you get us started with a little bit of your story?
Thank you for having me. I am a naturopathic physician and a body worker, and I myself have OCD, and my son has OCD. It was diagnosed when he was 8 years old. And so my personal experience, as well as my professional experience, has really led me into this direction and this interest and this passion of how do we help folks sit with anxiety, sit with discomfort, sit with emotional pain. And while that may sound like, an unpleasant topic, it's actually something really important, and it's big stuff.
Yeah. For those listening who maybe aren't as familiar with those terms, or maybe have some like misconceptions around the terms, can you define maybe what OCD feels like for you, or the actual, like, some of the definition around it? Because I think there's lots of misconceptions around, like, oh, well, was your 8-year-old like going and flicking on the lights, or like locking the doors? Like, those are the two images that a lot of my clients come up with all the time. I'm like, it's not always that. There's so much nuance, and it's not always like a physical action of checking things.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And you are 100% right. Obsessive compulsive disorder it's like woefully misunderstood a lot of the times. And it is trivialized as compulsive neatness. And really, OCD can be incapacitating and can take away all aspects of one's life. OCD swallowed my son. So I will explain, like, for him, he had something called just right OCD. And it meant that his brain was telling him that he needed to repeat behaviors. So let's say he was crossing from one room to the next through over a threshold, through a door. His brain would say, you've got to do that again and again and again and again and again and again and again until there's something inside himself that felt just right. And it
Hey.
could be getting dressed. Rituals could happen: getting dressed, going to bed, brushing his teeth, getting into the car. They snuck into every aspect of his life. And I use the word sneak. CD is really sneaky, and it kept moving the goalpost on him. So for him, just right maybe meant 4 times one day. It might mean 15. It might mean 40 the next day. And so you can imagine how that balloons over time, and it can take over somebody's life.
Absolutely. And as a parent, I think what I can imagine happening in scenarios where, if the shoes needed to be put on just right, how you could end up in this narrative like, but you did it fine yesterday.
Yeah, OCD is completely illogical and irrational. It does not make sense. It does not make sense. Your brain is telling you to do things. And what is also really just kind of devastating about OCD, it's a voice in your head. But not only is it telling you to do these sort of illogical things, time-consuming rituals, but it tells you that if you don't do them, something really bad is going to happen. Something really bad might happen to you or someone you love, and it's just so tough.
So tell me what it was like to stand at that intersection,
Mhm.
and having those two worlds kind of come together in
Yeah.
that way.
Well, we were living I'll tell you a little bit of the story. We were living in Spain at the time, and we lived there for 2 years. Our last 4 months in Spain were the first 4 months of COVID. Spain had we were in Barcelona. They had an incredibly restrictive lockdown. We couldn't leave our apartment for 2 months. My kids couldn't leave at all. My husband and I could go to the grocery store. And it was in that time that my son's OCD reared its head. And I will tell you that it was just, I panicked because obviously I recognized what it was. Obviously I knew he needed help, but I'm not a therapist. And certainly as a mom, you're triggered in all sorts of ways. And so we kind of dealt with it being locked down. And then when we moved back to the States, we got him into therapy and working with doctors. But what's interesting, and when you said the intersection, so the work that I do is helping folks through body work sit with difficult and hard feelings. What was so remarkable about this whole situation was that my son was treatment resistant, which means he was resistant to the gold standard treatment for OCD, which is called exposure and response prevention, which asks him to refrain from doing his ritual and sit with all the anxiety that comes up in not doing it, meaning that all these terrible things could happen and you have to sit with that. And he was so resistant to this treatment and to sitting with that discomfort and uncertainty and terror that OCD consumed his life for 4 years. And so we lived and our family lived basically held hostage by this illness and shuttling him from one program, an intensive outpatient program, to another intensive outpatient program, and his just unwillingness to do this. But I want to say his unwillingness to do this makes so much sense, right?
Yes.
It's asking an 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old to do what we struggle to do on a day-to-day basis, right? Which is
Yes.
to sit with our hard feelings and our
Mhm.
uncertainty, right?
Yeah. And we have so many more distractions or things at our disposal, right? Given the population that I work with, mostly women and mothers with anxious kind of tendencies, some bordering on compulsive or impulsive.
Hmm.
And it's like sometimes I have a hard time even getting my almost 40-year-old clients to sit with their feelings. They're like, no, hard pass. I'm not, I won't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And when people ask me, why do we have to sit with hard feelings? Like, why do it? It's really, 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 really hard work. And I think that's where I have to explain to people that if we live our life daunted by hard feelings, if we live our life afraid of embarrassment and failure and rejection and shame and all these feelings that feel really yucky, we don't necessarily jump at taking chances, taking risks, you know, making a job change, meeting a new person, going out somewhere new. And that's tough. And then in addition to that, all the behaviors that you talked about, all these behaviors that we use to distract, avoid, and numb our feelings are not behaviors that bring us into our present moment. They're not behaviors that move us towards ourselves, and they're certainly not behaviors that move us toward our best self. And so there's many, many, many reasons to sit with hard feelings.
How does one sit with hard feelings?
I have approached this through the lens of the body, through the lens of somatic work. And what I mean by that is the idea, like you said, of sitting with feelings. And my son, I could see it in his face during therapy when his doctors would say, you have to sit with this discomfort. It was like totally abstract, totally cognitive. What does that mean? And so the work that I do is let's actually see, what does it feel like in our body if we stop and pause for a moment and welcome, like invite in, and this may sound completely ridiculous, but hang in there with me. Invite in a feeling of discomfort, of frustration, an everyday frustration, an everyday feeling of insecurity or rejection. You could invite that into the body and just see, does it have a shape in your body? Does it have a location in your body? Does it have a color? Does it have a density or an intensity? And the work that I do is to actually go into our inner experience of emotion and just know and feel and learn what that's like. And that gives us something tangible and discernible to sit with.
And the science behind how emotions move through the body is so fascinating to me because the research that I've stumbled upon anyway says that emotions will enter in and peak and leave in roughly 90 seconds if we don't feed it with something, right? If we don't give it a story or a thing to hang on to, like, oh no, that would be bad. Oh no, that's not proper. Oh, that mom at the park's going to judge me. Oh, that no, you can't climb up the slide because, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what's fascinating to me in that is that it feels, even for myself, it can feel almost like climbing a mountain to carve out 90 seconds to just notice, like to notice that emotion come in, right? Like, oh, I'm getting mad. I'm getting mad that I'm going to have to tell you for the 10th time to put your shoes on and it's going to come out not so nice. And this is all happening in like a millisecond, right? Like less than a millisecond. And then it's like that emotion will peak for every person's different, but it will peak and kind of move on. Not always in 90 seconds, especially when we have like compounded stories about certain feelings. But in a similar way, what I work with my clients, I come from a lens of expressive arts therapy. And so it is a lot of body based resourcing. And where do you feel that? What happens when that looks like that? What is the metaphor? When you said, what is the intensity or the density or the thing? And I had my eyes closed. It was like I can feel that. Like I can feel what that would be like. And it was kind of like a pulsing in and out of the feeling that I was focused on while you were saying that. And I could tell that if I didn't pay attention to it potentially, that it would come out in some other way later.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what you're saying so beautifully is that we tend to go to our minds for insight and understanding and guidance. And if we make a conscious, intentional decision to try to shift that and go to our bodies have a natural wave-like experience of emotion, right? Like exactly like you said, it peaks and then it dissipates. And that is a natural way to move through and to feel and process an emotion. But when we get hung up on the words and the stories, the narratives, attaching meaning, and that's when emotion gets really stuck within us, right? And so, although it's very important to feel, to find the feeling and to give it a voice and what does it feel like? What does it look like inside you? But then also to really consciously detach from any kind of cognitive experience of it, at least for a few minutes, and let it be solely about being in the body.
What happens for people if being in their body actually feels really unsafe?
Yeah, yeah. Really incredibly important question. And I want to just say that as a body worker, I have an enormous amount of respect and reverence for the holdings that we have in our body, right? The numbness, the dissociation, the tension, the holding on of memories and traumas. And so the work is not about poking and prodding and pulling feelings out. No, no, the work is about a willingness and a acceptance to be with a feeling or not, to be with a feeling in the present moment or not. And both of those things are perfect, right? And so I think it's an approach, it's a mindful approach, a mindful and thoughtful approach to feeling, which is we're not going in and forcing and manipulating and pushing. We're just working with the present moment. So one of the kind of fun things about this work is people often come into body work and meditation and mindfulness and mind body work with a lot of preconceived notions. And they think that this work is all about, getting to some peaceful, Zen moment of, revelation. And I like to sort of throw that out the window, not because I don't honor that and respect that and think that's a really awesome goal, but really what we're trying to do is to work with the present moment. It's like, let's meet ourselves where we're at and figure out if it feels okay in any given moment to be with ourselves in a yucky feeling, to be with ourselves in a lovely feeling, to be with ourselves in a okay, maybe it's okay moment, but to see what it's like to embody ourselves in these different moments.
I like the permission of like sitting with it or not. Like
Or not.
what feels the safest, you know, or the most protective in this moment. And so what was the coolest thing about writing this book at the same time that you were working through this really deeply personal and impactful situation with your son?
Yeah. I think the coolest moment was sitting in on one of my son's therapy sessions with his doctor. And I also want to say that, I grew up in a time where I didn't even tell my parents that I had OCD. I'm not even sure that I knew. I don't remember, but I don't think I had a name for it until I was in my 20s and working with a therapist. So I did not have the therapy and the tools that my son was getting. And so in some ways I was going along and learning these really cool therapies, cognitive behavioral therapies along with my son and giving myself the tools to talk back to my OCD. But what was so cool is in this moment where the doctor's explaining to him, you have to sit with discomfort. And I looked at him and I saw this like blankness and confusion. And I knew apples don't fall far from the tree. So I knew that my son is a feeler like I am and that he needed vocabulary and direction to understand what that meant. And it was in that moment that I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm working on this book, but I've got to get through it. I've got to finish it. I got to do it because the world needs this. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That blankness that a person can feel, you know, when posed with those questions of where do you feel that? What is the feeling? What color might it be? Where does it live in your body? Or even just naming emotions. I think it's
Right.
like really challenging, right? We've got happy, we've got angry, and we've got sad, we've got worry or anxious or fear. You know, those ones can kind of be interchanged. And love.
Yeah.
You know, like even some of the words that you've used today is like inadequate. Words that I use with my client is like envy,
Hmm.
jealousy, the emotional language, even that we have been exposed to, is so, I want to use the word limiting. And
It's
I don't think
limited.
that's
Yeah.
true for everybody, but it's just like, how are you? Fine. How are you? Good. How are you? Okay.
That's exactly the word that I was thinking as you were saying that. And in my book, I describe a fantasy childhood emotions class where we teach our children that, all the names for all these different emotions. We talk about feeling emotions in the body. We talk about sitting through hard emotions and sitting through great emotions. And we cheer on our peers when they sit with something and they share something with us. We are doing a lot better with our kids for sure in their
Yeah.
emotional health.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that like the naming of them can be so, like, it's so incredibly powerful and also so incredibly, like, almost anguishing sometimes, right? Because if I'm labeling my emotion accurately and it's a feeling I don't love or that isn't, like, socially acceptable or might take some time to process and overcome, there's some, like, there can be stuff with that, right? Like, I'm feeling really defeated or I'm feeling really proud of myself or I'm feeling really alienated. You
Hmm.
know, it's like when we actually name these things, there's like, there can be a relational aspect to it too, especially if you're in conversation with someone around like, how is that person going to receive my emotion? Are they going to honor it? Do they have the capacity to sit with me in it? If I all of a sudden just blurt out the fact that like, I actually feel like I'm in total anguish in my
Yeah.
life right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing what being able to speak your emotion feels like, and also being able to hear it. Like I'll just because I maybe have the radar for it, I'll see, somebody speaking, public speaking, and one of the things they might say is, I'm feeling this right now, or gosh, I'm feeling nervous. Sometimes people will start out with how they're feeling. And I'm always so moved and impressed by that because I feel like it puts everybody, it kind of gets everybody grounded into being human, right? Like this, it is just purely human to have emotions. And, another thing that we haven't talked about is like the societal messages that we are getting from being little on up to, all ages is we hear things like grin and bear it, push through it, boys don't cry, grow thicker skin, pull yourself together. There's all this societal message that kind of hints at the fact that emotion is inconvenient or emotion is sort of inferior, right? As a society, celebrate the cognitive, we celebrate the intellectual, we celebrate our mind. And I'm not judging that.
Yeah.
But then the emotional self is kind of left behind a little bit. And, the words like keep your emotions in check, manage your emotions, check them, regulate them. It sends a lot of messages that we got it like watch this we could be very wary of our emotions because there's kind of a not a great thing, right? But when in
Hmm.
reality emotions are human nature.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and they're information. It's
Hmm.
like if feel almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, right? Like if you're expressing something in anger, well, that's bad. But if you're too excited about something, that's also bad, right? Like rein
Hmm.
it in a little bit. Don't be
Rein it
so
in.
zealous.
Hmm.
Like,
You're
yeah.
too emotional. You're too emotional. Like don't get emotional. Those are the messages we get. Rein it in. Rein it
Mhm.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What would you say to someone, Jen, who's kind of navigating maybe the murky waters of they've read a lot of things online about emotional regulation or sitting with the emotions, or maybe they have some preconceived ideas around what regulation looks like, right?
Hmm.
What would you say is like the very first kind of stepping stone to getting a little bit more comfortable with just feeling?
That to begin with a really, really cool feeling, right? So, like, find a time where I don't know if somebody gave you a compliment or you looked at a sunset or just something like takes your breath away. Maybe it's a scene in a movie or a song that comes on that is really just like it, like I said, it moves you. Can you just stop, pause for a minute or two and just see what that's like to welcome and invite that feeling and that experience in? It sounds a little mundane and it sounds a little like but it's big stuff. It really is because it begins to train your feeling muscle, right? It begins to allow your feeling muscle to begin to take in a feeling, to have a moment to find it, to feel it, to experience it in your body, and then to move on. And just that simple experience is trust that emotion can come and go and you can move forward. And then you can begin to try that with an everyday kind of frustration, right? Something that may not feel as threatening as a bigger emotion, right? But to sit and to welcome in and almost shake the hand of a frustration and to see what that feels like for a couple minutes.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm gonna try that. Because even those of us who may be experienced in this kind of thing or know too much about it, right?
Hmm.
I know what I'm supposed to do. I know what's good, in the moment, and you can forget. That's even a good reminder for me to not just drop into those moments where maybe that feeling is leading to a thought, which is leading to like an undesirable behavior, where like I might be too loud or too intense in a parenting way, right? And so it's to remember to feel into those other moments as well, where your kid puts their hand on you, or they really want to linger on a hug. Those moments are just as important to drop into as the ones where you're potentially trying to change a pattern or parent differently or process things differently with your partner, right? Like to drop into those moments that give you something is also important.
I love it. I love that, and I love the way you described it. It made me think about there was a type of therapy that my husband and I stumbled onto in my son's 4-year journey. It's space. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called supportive parenting for anxious childhood emotions. And what's so remarkable about it is that it is not about kind of saving your kid from a hard feeling or trying to fix something or trying to take their pain away, which is a natural instinct, right? As a parent, you don't want your child suffering. And if there's anything you can do to make it better, you do it. But when you're dealing with OCD and it also any kind of anxiety disorders, when you're quick to fix and you're quick to give your child reassurance, that actually they develop a reliance on that. And it's sending them the message that they can't do it on their own. I'm being a little bit like frank and harsh about it,
Yeah.
but that's the sort of underlying message. And what space does is it teaches parents how to be supportive using supportive statements like, I see that this is really hard and I see that you're really scared right now, but I know you can do this. I know that you can handle that hard emotion. And I'm not going to be part of your bedtime ritual. I know that's really scary, but I know you can do it.
Yes.
And there's a very different message that gives a child who's anxious because it might be really hard and scary and but there's also this, oh, my mom and my dad know that I can handle this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. A go-to phrase that I use with my oldest, who has ADHD and some sensory things that lean into, depending on the time and the regulation,
Hmm.
anxious tendencies. And the thing that I say to him when he's experienced a big emotion is I'm not scared of you. And I'm not scared of this emotion. And I can sit here with you if you would like to, or I trust that you'll be safe if you need to go into a different room or you need to jump on your bed. I trust that this will pass. It might be an hour, right? Like for
Yeah.
little kids and tantrums and meltdowns and sensory and their thoughts are running wild and things are really loud. Sometimes we've got an hour and sometimes we don't. And I treat those things very differently. Like if we've got 10 minutes, my approach to it is very differently. But if we've got an hour and it's a Saturday afternoon and something feels really intense, it's like, you know what? We got this. Do you need to jump around? Do we need to go for a walk? You need a glass of water? Do you need me to do nothing? How close do you need me to be with you? Because I can back off, I can say nothing, or I can continue to talk.
Hmm.
There's all of these ways to create space within that, pun intended,
Hmm.
where you can show up and sit with. And it requires a bit of your own internal trust that, okay, I can see where this is maybe going. I've seen this go in a really worst case scenario way, but we're gonna sit in it together for a while, and you may need redirection, you may need something, and we're gonna assess whether that thing is gonna be helpful or hindering, and then we're gonna see where that goes.
Yeah. And what's really cool about that is just something I noticed. You're modeling like, okay, so I'm struggling a little bit. This is hard for me. You can identify I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling I don't know what that feeling might be. You could say you're scared, you're fearful,
Mhm.
but but you can identify a feeling within yourself and model being okay, giving it permission to just be there and to be with it. And also you're modeling putting words to it, right? Like you're modeling finding a word and being able to share it, which is just terrific
Mhm.
stuff. Yeah.
Mhm. And all of that. And so, Jen, can you just verbalize where we can find all of these resources? I will put them in the show notes, but just can you verbalize the title of your book, where people can find you and all that?
Sure. So the title of my book is The Feeling Muscle: How Felt Emotion Can Help You Sit With and Outlast Hard Feelings. And it's available in paperback and ebook, both on Amazon. You can order the paperback from any bookstore, local or big. It just has to be special ordered. And the ebook, I think, it's also on Barnes and Noble as well. And I have a website, www.drjennrapkin.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And I appreciate all of your vulnerability and your son's vulnerability and his
Yeah,
consent in you being able to share this so that it's a conversation that is out in the world. And I think that's really important and brave.
yeah. Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for creating this online community where people can come and learn and feel a shared experience. So thank you.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Jen. I appreciate everything.